Cue this. All right. Well, hello. Thank you so much for being here. I think most of you may know me, but my name is Aaron Glover, for those of you who don't. I am the executive director of the Writers Garret, and I am so pleased for this opportunity to spend a little bit of this afternoon with you and one of my favorite poets in the world, and also that I know personally, Logan Cure. Um, Logan and I have now been sort of working together almost a decade. It's been a while, so we've known each other for quite a while. We've been working together. She has been a real encouragement to both my writing and I think the larger community through the Inner Moonlight uh, reading series and podcast. And when she came up to me and said, "Hey, I just realized, well, I've been realized, but now I've finally decided I think I would like to mark the 10th anniversary of a couple of my chapbooks." I was, what can I do? And was even more excited when she said, "Would you like to talk with me about it?" And I said, "Absolutely, yes." So, so excited to be here today, and thank you all for being here to listen and celebrate this work. So, before we get too far into it, for those of you who may not have the official biography, Logan Cure is a queer poet and educator. She curates Inner Moonlight, the monthly reading series and podcast at the Wild Detectives in Dallas. She earned her MFA in creative writing from the University of Carolina at Greensboro. Her debut full-length poetry collection, Welcome to Midland, was shortlisted for the Reading the West Book Awards, and she is also the author of Still and Letters to Petrarch. Whoa. Please, can we get some snacks
Uh-oh.
and however we're celebrating for Logan Cure right now?
Thank you.
So yeah, to get us started, Logan, I guess maybe can we get a little bit of context around how this sort of the picture it. It's 2015. Logan, go.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. Thank you for doing this with me, Aaron, and thank you for everybody for showing up today. I'm so excited to see all of your beautiful faces. Okay, so these two books are really the two halves of my MFA thesis. So I came into my MFA with some of the poems from Letters to Petrarch were in my MFA folio submission. Um, And I worked on that project. It was always like a concept piece, right? So Letters to Petrarch is exactly what it sounds like. It's epistolary poems directed to 14th century Italian poet Petrarch, who popularized the sonnet and wrote all of his poems throughout his life for this probably maybe fictional beloved figure, Laura. So the letters and letters to Petrarch tell him a single day spent with Laura. So that always had this really tight concept from the beginning of writing those poems. And still was sort of the poems that happened when I was not writing letters to Petrarch. So being an MFA program, some of you will know, you have to write like a ton of poems, and I am kind of slow, really, naturally. And so I was having to produce all of these just sort of other things that were not the primary thing I was trying to think about. And so I did not originally imagine the poems in Still being a chapbook. I did not think they necessarily had anything to do with each other. And then I set them next to each other and just sort of asked myself, like, could these be a chapbook? Like, you're supposed to have this sort of publishable product at the end of the MFA. And so I asked myself, is the other half that? And I did the crazy poet thing where you print them all out and put them on the floor, and turned out they did talk to each other in ways that I did not necessarily know when I wrote them, which is sort of like the magic and mystery of the mind of a poet. But after my MFA, I burned out hard and did not write a damn thing for like a couple of years. But in that couple of years, decided to start submitting. So I started submitting to journals and started trying to place letters to Petrarch and also this sort of other thing that I put together, and it had a few different names. I can't even, it was so long ago, I can't even remember what the previous titles of Still were, but there were several. Um, and it was just sort of weird luck that they both got placed and came out kind of around the same time. So a lot of time actually elapsed. Like I graduated from my MFA in 2010, and it was a full 5 years later when these dropped. And having them both come out at the same time was like, I'm not gonna lie, pretty stressful. And they're so different too. Y'all will hear the vast sort of difference in tone and what's happening in both of these books. But yeah, that's sort of the short version. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the interesting thing to me is that like that that there wasn't necessarily a plan that these were supposed to be sort of both 2015 releases, but that they kind of happened that way. And interesting. I think as you read from them today and kind of as the conversation goes, how they really show two very important kind of pieces of the journey of Logan Cure Poet. I think that's super cool stuff. So, um, because the first version or the first of these two, the books that I ever got from Logan was Letters to Petrarch. I That is the arbitrary reason why I'm going to ask you to read from Letters to Petrarch first. So, would you share a little bit of Letters to Petrarch with us?
Yes. So the blue book over Aaron's shoulder is his copy. And this is the copy that I'm going to read from today. They all look different. So this was published by Unicorn Press, and they handmade their books. Yes, yes, you got a shrimp copy. I love that you have a shrimp copy. So some of them came out with like completely unexpected patterns. There were some that were like super bright colors. I never knew what I was going to get. And I that's one of the things that's like so beautiful about these. Mine is also numbered. Um, not I don't think every single copy was numbered, but mine, the one in my hand is, it's number 38. So that's like sort of I just wanted to point to the magic of this beautiful handmade thing.
Also, just super quick to interrupt, copies of this are still available, are they not? So,
Yes.
in the after this reading email that you get, you will get links to where to get both of these books. We highly encourage you to go and purchase your own copy. And the next time you see Logan, she'll probably even sign it for you. I'm done talking now. It's you.
Um, so I am going to start with the poem that opens the collection, and it was actually the final poem that was composed for it. Um, so some of these poems are letters, like I said. You'll hear some poems that are also prayers, so to speak, but the titles correspond to the canonical hours. So the canonical hours are it's a way of measuring time by prayers that are told at certain points in the day. So that's how these poems tell the story of the day. So that's sort of how Petrarch might have conceptualized time in the day. So you'll hear both of those things. The opening poem is a letter. Dear Sir, you couldn't have known 366 of them, all for her, all dressed up, ink black, procession, a year and a day. This is how we mourn. 366 poems, repetitions of that same name, Laura, because that was all you had of her. Her body was nothing more than the angle of the L and the curves of her vowels. Her voice a replication of the way the R echoed in your dreams. Laura. Her most mundane moments were the world's best kept secrets. You simply couldn't have known what it was like to have even one of the 916 days she afforded me. So I will do my best to tell you. Thank you. Um, so one of the things I was thinking really hard about is the way that Petrarch creates his Laura, right? So the way the story goes, he maybe met her from like across the room. She might be a total figment of his imagination. But over his his entire life, all of this work for her. And the feelings that he experiences are the sort of vacillation between like adoration, celebration, and being like really, really angry. The lady is unattainable, right? The tension of that. And he popularized so many things that we sort of perceive as cliche now. I think including the lady is unattainable. Um, but he is constantly making these references to like her lovely eyes and her lovely hands, this kind of like obsessive taking apart that again is like cliche to us, but would have been novel to his work. Um, so in thinking about how I wanted to talk about Laura, I really wanted to not take her apart. I wanted her to sort of do things, be active. So you'll hear some of those things, but that context of him and that sort of tension and unattainability is really something that I'm reaching for too. Sort of like asking the question, if he could write all of these like deeply emotional things about a person he did not know, and that resonates with me about somebody that I did know, like how much do we ever really know anything about anybody, right? Like how much are we all just sort of like projecting and making shit up? Um, so this poem is called Lauds, and that's the poem that's told as the sun rises. That morning, like every morning previous, she woke. And with this act, she answered my most frantic and repeated prayer that I would wake to find her living. We are not meant to outlive the presence of our gods. And I thanked her for choosing to see this day and me in it. I thanked her as if my faith mattered, as if her decision was made in light of my prayer. We were warned against this kind of worship. That morning, she opened her lovely eyes, and I believed the sun had risen. Yeah. Um, sir, you'd never know it, but her room was always at least knee deep in her clothes. You could see her pulse in the thin black ribbon she wore around her neck. She had pretty handwriting. Sometimes she'd fall a step behind me, and I'd look just in time to see her turn the most perfect pirouette. Yeah, so that was definitely one that came from this question of like, how can I let her do things, right? How can I have these insights about her that are not just about that kind of like surface what you see? Um, thank you, Gail. I'm super stoked that Gail is here today. So one of the things that I'm going to share with y'all today is audio versions of both of these books. And the audio that accompanies Letters to Petrarch is a recording of a live event that was the launch for the book way 10 years ago. And Gail was the MC for that. So we talk a ton about like the background of this book, and I read a bunch of pieces from Petrarch. So if you're intrigued by like the nerdiness around old old Petrarch stuff. All of that is in that audio companion. And Gail was an amazing host, and asked me so many great questions. So y'all will all get links to download that and some audio for Still too. Um, so you can hear more about all of the nerdy layers of the of this collection. Um, this poem um, is probably, gosh, it's one of the ones that sticks with me. It was one of the few that I was able to place in a journal. It was hard to place these poems in this collection just because they are so nerdy and so strange, so niche. This poem's called Vespers. We had no idea how cold it was until the walk home. The color was draining from the day. Wind rushed and swirled from all directions, sliced through too thin clothes. We were simply unprepared. We ran down the long sidewalk, alternately surpassing and falling behind each other, our laughter rising as electricity gathered in the thin air, like before a storm, like January. Together we closed the distance between ourselves and the bed we'd left. Her messy desk, my shoes we both tripped over, the toothbrushes that were identical except in color. We were almost home. The difference between sky and ground became the difference between gray and other gray. And we stood at the door, breathless, our noses pressed together numbly as she rose on tiptoe to kiss me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So Logan, I'm realizing now when we talked before this, I was like, yeah, you're gonna read some stuff, and then we didn't actually talk about what you're gonna read. So I don't know, like, I mean, I am happy to keep listening to reading, or I have questions, or where do you want to go?
Feel free to jump in at any time. I have a few others that I wanted to read from this, but
Real talk, Samantha. Gray and Other Gray. Yeah, no, that was the first time I read it. I was like, oh my God, it's so good. Yeah. Okay, we'll read some more. Read some more.
okay. Um, let's see. Yeah, I wanted to read sort of the closing three. Um, so none of these poems have the same opening. So when you read them in order, there's more than one "Dear Sir," right? But a lot of them are some variation on that. Um, this one comes near the end, the third to last piece, and it's where um, the addresses to him get more direct as the collection moves. Oh, sir, before it all, before that first dizzying kiss, we talked for hours one night in her room. As sleep began to settle over us, I got up to leave. Would you stay, please? In bed, I tried to keep my distance. I listened to her breath as it slowed. The darkness seemed expectant. Perhaps I could sense that this was the eve of something colossal, like the last event that precedes a stunning triumph or the beginning of a war. She only asked me to say that one time. Once was enough. Thank you, thank you. And this was the first poem that was composed for the collection. Um, so it makes sense. You'll hear the sorts of threads that I picked up on from the opening poem. Like when I sat down to write that opener, um, I asked questions about where it started, right? So you'll hear those connections. This is Vigils. For her, I slept flat on my back and straight, a lowercase L, with occasional delusions of being an uppercase I. I accommodated her question mark, curled and leaned against me, over me. We were so hastily written. Tell me, How did you sleep? How did you sleep without her? Oh, thank you. Ooh, I love the little floaty hearts. I love it. Okay. And this is the poem that closes the collection. So, one of the other things that I picked up on from Petrarch's work is the thread around dreams. So that I had to, in deciding not to take on the kind of like pulling apart trope, I had to think about the things that I was going to connect with. And the dreams thread was something that came out for me in ways that were definitely were intentional, right? But like I was saying earlier, the ways that your own poems surprise you. Um, so this is the poem that closes the collection. It's called Postscript. The dreams have not stopped. She arrives entirely intact. Ask any of my senses, as if my memory heeded my heart's wish to keep her. I could sculpt her in my sleep. She is always the most perfect representation of herself, always walking away from me. Thank you.
Man, Logan, that is this is I just hearing you read them is also so interesting because I know your voice so strong, and I know I've heard you read other things multiple times, and like some of this stuff and just being like, wow, I catch it. But one thing that we talked a lot about was the epistolary form, right? The letter. So can you say a little bit more about why you chose that, why that form, for some of you, some of the folks I think that are here were here when you were talking about Edna St. Vincent Millay
Yeah.
and the just sort of like the address. I think that's an interesting thing. You had several interesting things, in my opinion, to say about that. So talk a little bit more about that decision, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. I I think for me anyway, I get a lot of mileage out of poems that take the form of some other kind of writing. So I'm interested in poems that are instructions, or poems that are additionally something else. And like formal poetry offers us that, right, in very like tight and expected ways. But Petrarch popularized the sonnet. So the sonnet was kind of the other obvious, sort of potential mode I could have gone with. Um, that's just, I don't know how else to put it other than that's sort of like not where my heart was. Uh, these poems started because I was like heartbroken and all fucking sad about it, right? Um, and I took this epic road trip like the summer after I got dumped by Delora in the book. And I went to Greensboro on this epic road trip to visit my friend Alan Brilliant. So Alan Brilliant is the person who founded and ran Unicorn Press for decades. And I met him in undergrad when he was teaching a course about hand making books. And he got done in College Station and moved back to Greensboro. And so when I planned this like epic US road trip, I he was one of my stops.
Yeah.
And I had been like really in my feelings about my breakup and blah 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 and not writing, right? And he said to me that he would not personally accept my stopping writing. He was like, that's bullshit. Like you need to get over it. You need to figure out like a way to keep moving forward. Like don't let these events in your life like take that from you, basically. Um, and I wrote Vigils
Whoa.
because he basically dared me.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that.
so yeah, so I think it was just sort of what felt like the way that I could channel what was a lot of really difficult emotion that felt gross, and felt like something that I did not want to address or process or touch. Um, and then Al, who I respected very much, was like, figure it out. And the letter was the way that I figured it out. Um, yeah.
This is it's curious to me, especially because like I've heard you say um something you said to me that actually was really valuable, and that I've heard you say to many other writers when they've shared their work, and talking about sort of like the universal audience and how that's kind of a bullshit thing. And especially kind of having heard you say that and seeing this being sort of very specifically, dear sir, and in the direction of making that um, drawing that parallel with him to him. Uh, that was just such an interesting choice, you know?
Yeah. And I think we're all doing that to some degree with something else that we've read or something else that we've connected with. I think that too was helpful for me to like focus on, because it is sort of unlikely for you know a, a young queer woman in the 21st century to have all of these like big feelings about you know Italian dude from the 14th century who did not know her, right? And I think the sort of unlikeliness of that was was interesting to me. And thinking about the ways that we're always really in direct conversation with some other writer, right? Some other inheritance that we have, whether that's the genre that we're writing in or what we're writing about, right? And it felt, I don't know, that his work was like really influential in like a number of ways. Like when they decided to sort of like figure out the standard rules in written Italian, they looked at his work. Like the fact that this guy changed everything for like some lady, like I just
Yeah.
um that really spoke to me, and I think that helped me to kind of access my own ability to make art out of this thing that felt otherwise painful and untouchable, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. No, we, Gail, I see your question, and we are going to get to questions. We are. I think that that's interesting what you were saying as you were talking in there about that it's sort of in response to somebody else, right? That there's that thing. Um, I see your message, Sam. Thanks for being here for the moment. And actually, I think that sets up still a little bit in an interesting way. Again, partially because we're having this conversation. I didn't know that still existed for a long time. And so I just had letters to Petrarch and then Welcome to Midland and read Welcome to Midland and loved that. And then as we started having this conversation, then I got still, and it was so fascinating to read that work and say, oh wow, the conversation that's happening between Welcome to Midland and Still is really, you can see that conversation. So for those of you who haven't read anything from it, there's a small bit of context, and now I'm going to say, Logan, please take us into a reading from Still, please.
I will, yes. Yeah, so like I said, these were the poems that sort of happened otherwise. And I think it's sort of one of the other things that comes out of like the direct address to Petrarch is that kind of there's a literal formality to it. Dear Sir. Um, and and the other poems being uh literal prayers, they're still relaying things to Petrarch directly, but they are prayers. So there's a the kind of like elevated, sacred tone makes it such a different project than what you're about to hear.
Also, it's hardbound, right? Like even that, right? Especially when you're thinking about the specific objects of stuff, like the fact that this is a beautifully hardbound, handcrafted thing is like it's that. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, and still, so this is a beautiful sort of plume of blue smoke, right? Um, and it came out through Finishing Line, which its finishing line is a small chapbook press that requires you to do like a sort of pre-sale hustle. So I had to try to sell a lot of these books like as it was coming out. So the experience of publishing them was like drastically different too. This sort of like handmade, here's the press run, we're going to number them by hand kind of scenario, versus this other experience of like, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to be great, but you're going to have to like really hustle your ass off. Um, so I'm going to read, um, so I'm going to tell you a fun fact about this book, and then I'm going to read the opening poem. So the dedication in this book is for Parker. And that's my dog that I had during this time of my life. When it came time to dedicate this book, I decided she was the most deserving. Um, so the opening poem is called Sixth Street. I never smoke just one cigarette anymore. I light them tip to tip, only Camel number nines, unless I've run out, in which case I'll take anything from anyone. I'm learning to swallow whiskey neat without scrunching my nose. I believe that once I have achieved this, I won't be so easily startled, so precious and cowardly. I finally know the secret. It arrived kneeling in a cramped, dirty bathroom as all the pain I ever felt violently heaved from my body. I was grateful that the heels ticking across the floor and into the neighboring stall belonged to a stranger. I counted her 10 red toenails, speculated hazily that each glittering spike must have been 4 inches easy. Then, all at once, it was clear. All suffering can be bodily. Anyone who can touch me can make me not alone. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the owner of the heels, her arm brushed mine as she carefully leaned forward, applied a glossy layer of red to her lips. I smiled, broadly enough she could count my teeth. I bought another round for my dizzy, laughing friends, drove home against someone else's better judgment. I slept dreamless. Thank you. Yeah, the smoke on the cover immediately comes into context, right? So the speaker in these poems is this sort of villainous voice. Somebody told me one time that whenever they read this book, they feel implicated. So that is a very different kind of tone than Letters to Petrarch, certainly. In this next poem, I think this was, I think, one of the earlier pieces that I felt was like really successful. Um, and this was definitely one of the crowd pleasers
So successful, wait,
from
successful in what way?
in that I felt really happy with how it came out. And I think too that it did so well at readings. That's always clarifying. Um, Whenever you are trying to figure out your work's connection, the best way to do that is to like literally be able to see the audience. Um, so the ways that this poem tended to stick with people made me feel pretty pleased about it. This one's called Condolences. From now on, I will tell people that you died. I will say it calmly, without tears. It is not that I want pity or take pleasure in lying. I have simply grown tired of mapping the perforations we made, intolerant of questions concerning who broke what. I officially excuse myself from this exercise. I am not interested in people's opinions of my victim or villainhood. The only thing people should be allowed to say to me about you is I'm sorry for your loss. And when they ask me what happened to you, I will tell them without hesitation that one day your heart just stopped. Thank you.
It's a pretty savage poem. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, yeah, one of the things I did when I was trying to hustle this book that didn't exist was make postcards so that I could hand things to people at readings so that they would have something to remember me by and hopefully, like, find it in their bag, go buy the
By the
book,
book.
whatever.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. And so I put that on postcards. And I really hope some of those got sent, you know?
Yeah. Well, because you're like you've got your MFA in Greensboro, but like you are also like you come from performance background, so you really that audience interaction thing is like you get it that matters, you know. So that
Yes.
so where wait just because I'm just let's get it on record. Where were you performing when you were at previous places?
So that's a great question. So I did come up as a performance poet. So when I was in undergrad, that was the community that was present in Bryan College Station. And so I did that. Hosted the slam there for a while. So that was my first real experience of community was that community.
Yeah.
And that is all about, that immediate audience connection. And I think that changed the way that I understood what I was doing on the page. Like I'd been a writer my whole life, with that experience of it not being in a void anymore, was really powerful. And by 2015, I was here in DFW. So I so I guess the first place I went in DFW was the giant half price for the Dallas Poetry Community
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
readings, and that's where I
yeah.
met Gail. Um,
Wow.
like years and years ago. So in 2015, when I was hustling still, I was visiting, the readings that were happening at Deep Ellum and All Detectives. I went out to the dock in Fort Worth. I was basically trying to get in front of anybody who would have me, because I was trying to move this book. Um,
I
and
love
it was quite an education.
I love that you just said as you were hustling still, and you mean still the book, but the way you say it, it sounds like you were hustling still as in continuing to hustle. And it's like, oh man, the realist of real poetry moment right there, right? The multiple layers of meaning that we're going for. So yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Well, and
didn't
that's why
mean
I picked, go ahead.
I was gonna say I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah,
No,
I
no,
know
no.
you're on your way to another poem, but I just thought that was interesting to note. So,
I was on my way to the title poem still.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah, so there were other titles before still. I can't remember what the hell they were. I'm sorry. I wish my memory was that good. Um, but I chose the sort of title track, so to speak, because I thought this poem spoke to a lot of the things that I was getting at. And I remembered that this poem was in response to a prompt. And it was one of those prompts that had like 10 different rules. Like you have to name a street name and you have to have somebody's proper name and you have to have like all of these things. So sometimes those poems are successful. This poem is called Still. The woman behind the counter asks together, and I think yes, 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 as he fumbles with the 12 pack, gives me a drunk, crooked smile. It has been a long time since that 15th summer, since the bracelet I made him out of a napkin disintegrated in his wallet, since my thumb ring he stole fit any of his fingers. Yet here he is. Here we are, on a beer run for some people I don't know who live in my town, friends of his girlfriend. They are waiting. Looking at him in my passenger seat, I think I shouldn't take him back to the warm, dim apartment on Dartmouth Street, to his pretty girlfriend holding the lid of the whirring blender, margaritas all around. Maybe I should just keep driving. I could wear this shirt for days if I had to. We could go far enough, no one would find us. San Francisco, a city to swallow us. We could change our names. He would only be mad to me. But I take him back. I do. Because I have to. And I sit and I watch him talk and drink and laugh like summer at 15, like my goddamn birthday. But I don't say much because it's been so long. And what would I say anyway? He walks me out to the parking lot, hugs me, and I press my face into his chest to breathe in his cigarettes and the cedar scent of his cologne. He starts to walk away from me, but turns back, kisses me hard on the mouth, his tongue opening wide that place in my chest where I keep him, the sprawling memory of the way he held me first. Thank you.
I like that poem.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have an end time, Aaron?
I mean, we are officially ending at 3 o'clock. However, it's 3 o'clock plus a few minutes. It's fine. Sneakily, I was like, okay, this should probably be finished by 3:15 is sort of what I was in my mind thinking. So, yeah. So, yeah, do another if you would.
All right, yeah. So this is kind of content warning on this poem. It's a little violent. But this poem does have an interesting sort of story behind it. So we were talking about how I was a performance poet, and one of the podcasts I listened to all the time was called Indie Feed back in the day. And it was a performance poetry podcast that ran for years. I was a huge fan. Started being a fan when I was in an undergrad in like 2007. And this poem was the first poem that I got on the channel myself. So I submitted it and like did not have like the proper recording equipment for it to sound good. And they wrote me being like, "We love this poem, but like you got to get a better mic, girl." So I did. And they also required you to have like a online presence. And so I bought logencure.com. So nice recording equipment and logencure.com coming into my life because this poem had the opportunity to get out in the world. Like those were some important moments. This poem is called Alan. He always smelled like the Texas-shaped air freshener that hung from the rearview mirror of his truck. Strawberry leather and cool cigarettes. He'd show up at my doorstep at 9 a.m. on a Monday, and we'd get fucked up. Drive around, blast metal that rattled the loose change in his cup holder. Listen to how good this guy screams, he'd say. He never stopped at yellow lights. He taught me how to ash out the window. He and I had only one thing in common, but it was the kind of thing that can get two people pretty damn far. We just couldn't stand being alone. He kept a weapon behind the driver's seat. In its idle position, it was a thick steel cylinder roughly the length of his forearm. With a flick of his wrist, a heavy spring with a solid metal tip telescoped out from the handle. The sound reminded me of someone sprinting with a stick down a chain link fence. It was flexible, whip-like. He demonstrated, making a few whistling incisions in the air. He showed me the blood on the tip, blood where the coils bit through the boy who attempted to rob him in his truck at a stoplight at 3 a.m. Protect yourself, he said. Never forget that. He took care of my girlfriend and me the Sunday we did mushrooms, watched us riot inside. He pointed out the prettiest colors, textures that undulated and throbbed, tried to help me unclench my jaw, her unclench her fists. Mostly, I remember moving through static, resistant air, how even the smallest decisions seemed like riddles or threats. He crashed at our house that night, and the next morning my girlfriend left for work still tripping. I found him sprawled on the living room floor, one arm slung over his eyes. Alan, I said. Hey, Alan, until he lifted his arm to squint up at me. You can come get in bed with me if you want. He asked if he could hold me, and with my skull still buzzing, I let him. He closed himself around me. I marveled at his heavy warmth, his stout, certain arms. He reminded me of the way my hands smell after I've climbed a tree. I eavesdropped on his blood, listened for the person sprinting with a stick down a chain link fence, the screams of the boy, the sick, dull noise of body striking pavement, foot striking body, the familiar roar of his truck. I remembered his clear stillness, how he didn't look away when he said, I'm afraid I'll kill someone. Thank you. Okay, so maybe one more, Aaron.
Yeah, do.
All right. So this one is a poem that I chose as the title of this event today. This poem is called Make It Memorable.
Yay.
Make it memorable, especially since you have no intention of sticking around. The key is to never tell a single lie. She's only going to believe half what you say. Never lying will earn you doubt in your uglier truths. The first time you kiss her, catch her off balance, the top of stairs or on an uneven sidewalk. Pull her close. Kiss her hard enough, she'll think she might just drop without your arms. Always smell incredible. Consistently make her about 5 minutes late to work. Never let her take the whole day just for you. Drive her yourself if you have to. Forget about words like sweetheart. She's a pretty thing, so use something like gorgeous. Make sure she hears you call at least one other person that. Like I said, you must never lie. The end should not surprise her. If you give her time, she'll even choose it for you. The trick is in the stories, the wild, embracing afternoon exchange on her bathroom counter. How far you're willing to walk in a blizzard. The photograph tucked in the pages of a book you'll lend her with no expectation she'll give it
Ah, so good. No, my God. Well, and just like what a great tee up to the question. I mean, the quote that you started as we were talking about this, that someone said that they felt like implicated, by reading this work, by listening to you read this work, I'm blushing, like I so I think that's a really interesting, this is happening alongside Letters to Petrarch, right? Like that these two projects, right? That the perspectives of these two projects are sort of happening somewhat simultaneously. Like, can you talk a little bit about how the two forms sort of happened at the, like why? There, that's a good question. Why?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I guess I was thinking about that. I was and looking at the way these poems kind of sit on the page, and one of the other things that happened in my MFA program was one of my professors took an interest in me. That's what you hope happens, right? When you uh, go to an MFA program, is that somebody like sort of sees the book they need to hand you. And I was handed Richard Zeichen's Crush. And that book has all of the kind of ethereal, like villainous tension that I think I was like striving to imitate. Um, so in reading this and thinking about sort of my younger self, I see this like an invitation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I think that it's so also so yeah, as I mentioned, when I reading this, I see the line to Midland now because because of Letters to Petrarch, the way that that exists in the world, and then the way that Welcome to Midland exists in the world is like these could be very different poets. And having this sort of piece right there that's sort of like, aha, there's a little triangulation, that um that poet makes. I can see the young version of that in this. Um,
Yes, yeah, and thinking about that villainous voice, right? So when I decided to write Welcome to Midland, one of the intentions that I set was like, okay, like what if the speaker here is the hero? Um, what if that's not the tension? What if that's not complicated? What if this is written from the perspective of like, yeah, this is the voice that we are rooting for. And I think the other things that I was thinking about, like, um, in thinking about letters to Petrarch, I was trying to sort of embody the beloved, the other. That voice is very disembodied from the self in a lot of ways. And so is the voice in Still. The voice in Still can describe a lot of sort of external things, but there's not a ton of like real embodiedness. And so that plus sending work out and having a gender neutral name. I was asking myself, like, how often is my work being mistaken for the voice of somebody I'm not? And so how can I sort of imbue the voice of my poems with something that is like unmistakably me, the voice of a queer woman who actually believes herself to be the hero. And so that is the voice in Welcome to Midland.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that is it's I mean just having heard that and obviously having read it so much, that becomes very clear. I mean, almost as you have mentioned and sometimes even joked a little bit about that as that book came out and people were like, "Oh, so your autobiography," and you're like, "Hold on, one moment, please. That is not what this is. This is a queer woman who has lived in Midland, but that is not what this is." I think that's would have made makes the framing of Still a different piece than what it potentially uh, could, may have been in some other way. I think you also kind of mentioned the sort of disembodied thing. When I hearing Letters to Petrarch and rereading it is like it's so almost out of space and time. Like there's memory and we're marking time through a day, but we is who and where is who and what time is this 1400s is this now? Like, like I don't know what the so timeless, whereas Still reads so time and experience bound. Like, as we were talking about preparing this, I remarked how much Still resonated with me in my sort of like I remember early 20s and a lot of vibing that was happening with what you were talking about and like from the middle of the country, know that person with a truck, like been that person on the bathroom floor, like that kind of uh uh grip to this experience, I think is really um cool and would love, what do you think about place and the way that it happens in Still and versus Petrarch?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, the setting of letters to Petrarch is very like insular. It's sort of like what's only immediately around the speaker and the beloved. So when I teach, we talk about like the layers of setting, right? So like you kind of have we are in the universe, we are in the Milky Way, we are on planet Earth, we are in North America, we are in the United States, we are in Texas, we are in Dallas, we are in this room. So the more layers of that you build out for people, the more world you have literally built, right?
Yeah.
And Letters to Petrarch is like it's literally the room they're in. It's the table they're at. Um, it's the
The space
sidewalk they're
the,
walking
sp- the
down.
space of a single piece of paper, dear sir. That's what you got.
Yes, yeah, it's tiny, tiny. And I think Still is. more layers out, certainly. It's not really explicit about where we are, um, but certainly has those like cultural markers. And there are poems when like the speaker goes home to West Texas. Um, actually, maybe
Yeah.
can I read that one poem? Okay, so this is definitely the poem that becomes Welcome to Midland. There is that sort of tension of place. We have things that are obviously Texas. There are some North Carolina poems. It's not the central focus of Still. Those things appear. Um, but where are you? Where are you, hometown?
And especially because Welcome to Midland is so place sort of specific. I think that that's why this is its value, that's why it's matters, you know.
Yeah, so Welcome to Midland is it's right there in the title, right? It's like hyper obsessed with all of these like threads that make that particular place. So Still I think is a really interesting link, like you're saying, not just with the voice, but like what's happening with setting, and how important that is and how pivotal it becomes to like the telling of what's happening. Yeah, so this poem, for those of you who have heard or read much of Welcome to Midland, it will this is called Hometown. My third Christmas morning hangover in as many years. I hide it well. And this Christmas seems like every family photo of holidays past exposed directly on top of each other. These moments are recycled, reenactments instead of reality. And despite my headache, I never miss a cue. For 11 days, I marvel at the desert flatness, the way the road rolls out ahead like the end is affixed to the bottom of the sky. I count the dozens of pump jacks, try to find two in time with each other. I am at the age when celebrities seem to be getting older, and I am getting older than celebrities. I am alone on the front porch aside from the plastic glowing nativity scene, Joseph and baby Jesus with their burnt out Mary. I've noticed the plastic glowing baby Jesus seems comical where it used to seem threatening. Pictures of my 90s bangs and snaggle teeth on my mother's mantle seem endearing instead of embarrassing. I've decided I'm the type of person who wears cowboy boots proudly. And yes, my decisions have been heartbreaking. And my mother will cry at the airport. But I'll come back here in the summer because I always do. And the sky will open all around me and say, welcome back.
Ugh, Logan, you get me with these. You write these villain poems, but then you talk about the sky and the land in West Texas, and I'm just like, the world. It's so good. Um,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a Christmas poem too. So,
Yeah, no, right? Yeah, yes, yes. Where's the little star hanging up over it? I do. Gail put a question in the chat, which I definitely want to get
yeah.
to. Like, if I want to let other folks, if they have questions too. But I just want to like kind of wrap this a little bit in saying like 10 years. That's a long time. A lot has happened. Where do you reflecting on that to where you are now? Like, what is there something you want to say about that?
Yeah, it has been really interesting to look back. Um, you mentioned the kind of complicated reception that Welcome to Midland has had. It, it's not that it was poorly received, it was well received.
Yeah.
Just with a lot of bizarre commentary about it being like somehow the factual truth in a way that poetry never makes that promise. In fact, we're kind of notorious liars. I've one of the like Google results that led somebody to logancure.com was don't let poets lie to you. And I felt really like
I think we need to make an
amazing.
award for that, right? Like,
But that sort of experience of having so much pressure put on the voice of the poems happened a little bit with Still in looking back. There were some interviewers that asked me some things that were inappropriate. And as a young poet, I was gutsy. I really said some things to people in the interviews that were around, particularly Still. And so that's been sort of encouraging to look back on. I think what happened with Welcome to Midland has made me kind of guarded in some ways, um, that are valid and earned. But I think that gutsy poet that I was 10 years ago is so interesting. I think we could get back to her. She was
Okay.
fun.
Yeah. Say, hey girl, what's up? Come on.
Yeah.
Get in, get in. We're going to Midland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, so that is I'm excited. I know I mentioned earlier that you had led a Edna St. Vincent Millay workshop recently, and that is the last. I promise the last thing I will ask you before I say here are the questions people asked, and open it up to questions is what are you working on now?
Yeah. So I have been researching Edna St. Vincent Millay for years, forever. She's always been a poet hero of mine. Um, and some of you may have heard me tell this story, but you know, was a professor and was teaching out of the Norton American Anthology and realized that she was not identified in any way as being any flavor of queer in her biographical note and got super mad. So that has sort of spawned a ton of research and thought, into the reception of Welcome to Midland alongside the sorts of things that happen and get said around Malay, and sort of where we are culturally, the sorts of efforts around erasure, um, that are happening right now, right before us. So thinking about all of those things together is sort of where I am. I think I think this particular endeavor of looking back has been good because I am going to have to channel that gutsiness, if I'm going to say all the things that I really want to say on these topics.
And I think we want to hear them. So let this be. Maybe I'm speaking on behalf of. I'm going to try to speak on behalf of the group. I hope it's a unanimous thing. But go do it. Yes, we want that. We're interested. Um. Uh. Gail, you had a question. Do you want to just ask it? Or do you want me to read it out loud? Do you care?
Well, I mean, Logan can see it, so
Okay. Well, yeah. There's that too.
you know, I just was so interested in the use of the parenthetical lines from time to time at the between stanzas uh, uh, the letters to Petrarch, and I wondered uh, where that came from and kind of what the purpose was of those lines being set apart like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Think, when I think about the letters I have read that have really stuck with me, and that was one of the things I was reading a lot of, like not just epistolary poems, but letters and letters that Petrarch had written and other sorts of like literary letters as I was writing this collection. That sense of like the intimacy of them, of the that address to somebody specific. And the parentheticals are almost this sort of like extra layer of this like kind of secret aside, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that pattern of them creates sort of another layer of intimacy, which those poems are Dear Sir, right? So I think it's sort of that attempt to create connection even within that like formality of the
cool,
voice. Does that make sense?
very interesting. Thank
Thank
So the floor is open. If anybody has a question, feel free to come off the mic or drop it in the chat, either one. Also, I have other questions if no one else does.
Well, I would ask Logan, in addition to doing the research on Edison Vincent Ballet, which I find fascinating, I'd love to see what's going to come from that, is are you writing poetry right now?
So the Malay project is going to be essays, but I there's also an intention to have a round of sonnets within.
Cool.
So the like the fancy kind where there's 15 sonnets in total. Um, the first 14 are linked by their lines. So the final line of one is the first line of two, the final line of two is the first line of three, and so on. And then the 15th poem is all of the repeated lines just in order.
Right. Right.
So Millay was another famous sonneteer. And so I want to take on that. And probably not with all of like the iambic pentameter and all of that. My basic definition is 14 lines in a turn. Um, yeah, I want
Cool.
there to be all these essays and a crown of sonnets.
Excellent. Excellent.
So a light challenge is what you're saying.
Like, you know,
Alyssa, I saw you come off mic.
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Mine is less of a question and more of a comment. One, congratulations. Obviously, it's so exciting. And just my comment is I'm wrapping up my MFA now and like in the next 3 days submitting my manuscript. So to hear you talk about how you had these two concepts really, and even though they did speak together, how they held on their own as well is just helpful. So it's just very nice to hear those comments that you had. So thank you.
yes, yeah. And it took years to place them. So don't let that like rejection stop you. You will find the place that your poems belong. And I think that's one of the things that I think people really need to hear, is that a lot of projects don't immediately find their platform. It can take a long time, and those rejections don't, they're not like ultimately a commentary on your work. It's just whether or not that press aligns with what you're doing, and finding the alignment 100% is the important part. Um, People who are really going to like give a shit, believe in your work. And that was, that's one of the things I really like to talk about, especially with Letters to Petrarch, because Al was such an important influence for me. Like, not only did he teach me to physically make books, which is like such a rare, like, important piece of knowledge for writers to have, but believed in my work enough to put it out. Um, and that he was why I moved to Greensboro. I'm not sure I said that earlier. He he was I visited that summer, and then got my MFA there. But he was why I wanted to be in Greensboro. Um, so those types of relationships that we build, the networks that we build, the people that give a shit about us, like that is such an important thing for people to hear about the story of any book.
James Davis, another poet in the DFW area, when he was, I think, at Inner Moonlight, maybe he was talking about getting his book, Club Q, placed and then actually it winning an award. I think he said, I found the award I wanted to win and then courted that press for like 8 years to write, as he was writing his book and was like, I knew what they did. I knew that that was where I wanted to be. I felt that, like the vibe connection was right, and then sort of just like continued to work and build the connection. And it took 8 years, but then found a beautiful home for that book, and then ended up winning a prize. Like it was great. So many good wishes to you on your publishing journey, Alyssa, and also congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Does anybody else have any questions for Logan? Okay. Any other comments?
I would ask, just is there any difference in going back to middle these days? Is there uh
That's a really good question.
do you give,
So,
yeah, does anybody know, because poetry,
yeah,
is this big,
yeah,
so
yeah. I'm glad you asked. So, back in, I guess it's been a couple of years now, 2023. I was invited to come and teach a workshop and give a reading in Midland, Odessa, for the West Texas Pride organization
Oh, yeah.
that exists. Turns out. And so I went and taught a workshop at UT Permian Basin, and then gave a reading in a little coffee shop that was like full of like rainbow buttons and things, not too far from the house I grew up in, oddly, and read my very queer Midland poems to a group of people who'd like had my book at book club for the organization, out there in West Texas. And like that following week, they were having like one of the guys was like a library banning activist, and so he had like a court appearance in the next like couple of days where he used my book as an example of like the types of things that are like important to be told and things that we should not be banning. Um, so that, yeah, it
Yeah,
is, I would say it's different. And I am really, I could never have imagined
right.
when the book came out, when I wrote the book, that that kind of experience was like
That's
possible.
fine. Yeah,
But I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I got the chance to connect with my like the most specific intended audience I could have possibly had.
right, right. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear
Yes.
that. Mhm.
That is amazing. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we are actually coming right up on 3:15. I just want to say real quick to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for um, participating in the Writers Garret programming, but this one especially, Logan is such an incredible part of this community and has really put time and energy into building it. And both the Writers Garret and I personally am very thankful to you, Logan, for all that you have done and continue to do to build community here in the DFW area. So thank you for that. Thank you all for being a part of this reading and helping celebrate these incredible works. You will be getting an email from me after this with links to the audio recordings of both of them. Where to purchase all three of Logan's books. So if you don't have them yet, complete the collection. And most importantly, well, maybe not most importantly, but also importantly, on Wednesday, Logan is hosting the final Inner Moonlight. I'm sorry, should I let you do this? It's your job.
Yes, yeah. Come out on Wednesday. Inner Moonlight, the last one of 2025, not the final one ever, right? We will be back
No,
in
of the
2026.
year, of the year.
Of the year. It's going to be Lyric Hunter, our feature. I'm super stoked to hear her work. And as always, there will be an open mic. If you can't make it to the show, you can always listen to the podcast. It's called Inner Moonlight. It's available everywhere you get your podcasts.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, that I think that concludes us. Thank you all.